I retired 6 years ago from teaching at a seminary that prepares ministers, and I taught classes in Bible and in communication and in spiritual formation, and a lot of that turned into teaching about preaching. Moved down here and heard about Pathways, and then heard that retired ministers were being invited to come along and be chaplains. And when I'm talking to the residents, I'll explain every so often that a chaplain is a minister that doesn't work in a church but tries to bring the love of God to other institutions or organizations. And so I explain how chaplains work in hospitals or in the military and all of that. But I found that a lot of my past experience helped me with that, because I had a psych major in college and I worked in a psychiatric unit. I taught a course at the seminary on hospitality, and I took a certificate in spiritual direction that put a lot of emphasis on listening. And one of the things I learned in that program is that I can't fix people when they're telling me their story, but I can listen with them to hear what God is doing in their lives and try to help direct them to that. So I often tell people I wouldn't be visiting, I wouldn't be doing the volunteer work as a chaplain if I didn't think people could change. But I know that I can't change them. And so that means that when I come, I try to do more what I call a ministry of presence, that I'm there to listen, to hear their story, to hear what they're hoping for and what they're thinking about for their future, and try to listen about what God may be doing. And for many of the residents there, they want to talk about that. They want to talk about their faith and how it's helping them, encouraging them, challenging them, how they want me to pray for them, with them. Ministry of presence, I didn't invent that term, but I think it's really important for what we do. When I go to visit, I usually go just before dinner time, and I'll just walk around and say hello to people and ask what's new, and most often the answer is not much. But when there is news, sometimes I don't even have to ask, and I'm told that this is happening. I am off of my probation now, or I'm getting my driver's license back, or I just got a job and I have a lead on a new place to live and all of that. So I try to celebrate with them and say, oh, that's really good news, or that news made my day. I'm really glad about that. So I go around and I visit, and maybe sit with those who are sitting outside or in the tables. And when I started visiting like that, I wasn't comfortable right away. I wasn't sure what they would think of me. Who's this minister coming along? Can he talk about things other than the Bible and salvation? Can he just make small talk and talk about anything from life around here to what I do in my spare time? Eugene Peterson, he translated The Message and wrote a lot of books. He said God is present in the small talk. And so I try to remember that we may not be talking about spiritual things, but God is there. And my job is simply to keep my ears open to hear what God may be saying or doing, even in the small talk that we're having. So it took me a while to be comfortable. It took them a while to be comfortable with me. But I feel like there's a good rapport now, so that when I show up, they may know I'm different, that I'm this minister. And sometimes if a cuss word gets let out, they'll say, oh, sorry, preacher. And I'll have to say, oh, I might have heard that one before, or I've used it myself and tried to do better. But then they asked me to do devotions and do a little thought and a prayer before the meal was served. And so after a while, I'd come prepared to say something. And then I realized, I could offer to do this every time that I visit. And I decided I'd try to tell my way through the Bible stories. And that sets them in context, and it's not just a bunch of different stories that don't tie together, but you're seeing them go from week to week. And yeah, I was kind of happy that I finished one once, and I said, now we'll have to come back next week to see what happens. And I heard, oh, like they were engaged. They wanted to know what happens in the story. So I told my way through the whole book of Genesis over time, told my way through the Gospel of Luke. I've now making my second run through telling Mark's story of Jesus. And sometimes it leads to conversations and people connecting with the story and telling me, yeah, something like that happened to me, or I've had that experience. So I finish doing the devotion, I pray, and they serve up the meal, and then I wander around to the tables. I used to take a meal and sit down, but I realized that if I don't and just wander around to the tables and say hello to everybody, I can get better and more conversations. Because just after dinner then people scatter and maybe go back to their dorms or do other things. So that's been a good thing, to just go around and visit. And then people will say, hey, can I talk to you later? Or they'll say, would you pray with me about this certain concern in my life? And so after a little bit of time of visiting, then I say my farewells and head home. I try to stress with the residents who are listening, first, that I know that not everyone who comes believes, but I hope you find the stories helpful and interesting. And I repeat again and again that I don't want to shove anything down anybody's throat. But I also keep stressing that these are stories of God at work in people's lives who, yeah, they're transformed and they turn around, but it doesn't always happen immediately. And they stumble and they fall, but that God doesn't give up on them. Talking about Jesus in the Gospel of Mark, the disciples have been with him, and yet they don't understand what he's doing. And yet I keep repeating every time we tell one of those stories that Jesus may get frustrated with these disciples, but he doesn't send them away. He doesn't give up on them, just like God doesn't give up on us when we make attempts and we stumble. That if God doesn't give up on us, we ought to not give up on the future that God has for us. So that's some of what I try to do, both in conversation and in my devotion.